There's a moment in every great sports controversy where the mask slips completely, where the pretense of neutrality collapses and what you're left with is something raw, something undeniable, something that makes even the most casual observer lean forward and say, "Wait, did that really just happen?" That moment came on May 28th in San Francisco when Veronica Burton drove her elbow directly into Caitlyn Clark's face during an inbounds play with 16 seconds left on the clock, the Indiana Fever trailing by 1 point and the entire basketball world watching. The referees reviewed it. They huddled. They looked at the footage. And then they called nothing, not a flagrant, not a common foul, nothing. And that nothing cost Indiana a game they were good enough to win. But before we get to that elbow, before we dissect every blown call and every phantom charge that derailed this game, we need to start somewhere else entirely. We need to start with Aaliyah Boston walking into that post-game press conference, sitting down at the table, and making it crystal clear through every word, every pause, and every expression on her face that she was completely and utterly done being diplomatic about what happened on that floor. Aaliyah Boston is not a player who manufactures drama. She doesn't flip tables. She doesn't point fingers every time a call doesn't go her way. She's measured, professional, and genuinely one of the classier presences in the entire WNBA. So when she sat down after the Golden State Valkyries game looking the way she did, every single person in that room understood that something had genuinely crossed a line. "I wasn't even able to get into a flow," she said, and there was no theater in it, no performance, just a player describing with surgical precision what had been done to her game. "I think it's super hard to try and figure out and understand how the refs are calling it. I think it's super hard to get charge fouls when I don't think anyone's in legal position." Then she paused, and what came next was the most honest assessment of the night delivered by anyone in either locker room. "Shout out to the Valks. They did a great job selling it and the ref bought it, to be honest. So good for them." That's not venting. That's not a player blowing off steam after a tough loss. That's a composed professional describing with complete accuracy exactly what happened play by play over 40 minutes of basketball. And if you watch the game, you know she wasn't wrong about a single word of it. To understand what happened in San Francisco, you have to go back 6 days to Indianapolis. The May 22nd game between the Fever and Valkyries wasn't just physical in the normal WNBA sense, where contact is part of the game and both teams understand the stakes. It was grab her, hold her, elbow her physical. And Caitlyn Clark left that game with actual scratches on her arms, visible marks that weren't bruises from a hard screen or court burn from a tumble. They were scratches, from defenders treating her like someone to be worn down rather than guarded. Golden State coach Natalie Nakasi had a very specific plan, and she wasn't particularly shy about sharing it. "Clark can shoot from what feels like half-court," Nakasi explained, "so you simply cannot give her any air at all." The Valkyries trapped Clark off ball screens, switched everything, and rotated multiple bodies at her continuously so she could never settle into a rhythm with any single matchup. Every guard on Golden State's roster was going to guard her at some point. Clark knew it before the game even tipped off, and she described it calmly in a way that was almost unsettling in its composure. That calm was tested before halftime when Clark and Janelle Salon got into it and both players picked up technical fouls. That's the temperature this game was operating at, not frustrated at a bad call tension, about to boil tension, the kind where one more thing could ignite the whole situation. Indiana nearly won anyway. So when the rematch was scheduled for May 28th at the Chase Center in San Francisco, nobody on either sideline thought it was going to be a clean, flowing basketball showcase. The Valkyries left Indianapolis feeling like their blueprint worked well enough to run back. Clark went in already knowing she'd spend 40 minutes fighting for every catch, every drive, and every inbounds touch. She also knew the crowd would be different. At home, Fever fans travel everywhere and create a familiar environment in opposing buildings. In Golden State, the crowd was going to be loud, hostile, and completely against her from the opening tip. Burton pressing her body from the start. Golden State's length making every pass a problem, back soreness, a road crowd. None of that, as it turned out, was the worst part of the night. Let's talk about what Leticia Amihier actually did, because it needs to be stated plainly and without any softening. Amihier ran the same scheme repeatedly throughout the game. She would slide close to Boston, initiate the lightest possible contact, and then throw her body backward dramatically while waiting for the whistle. Amihier weighs approximately 118 pounds. Boston is a full interior post player. So when Boston so much as breathes near her, the visual looks bad even when the play is completely clean. And the referees kept falling for it. Not once, not twice. consistently enough that Boston picked up 2 fouls in rapid succession early in the second quarter and spent the rest of the first half planted on the bench. 0 points, 2 rebounds, in the entire first half. That's the damage Amihier's flopping performance inflicted on Indiana before halftime even arrived. Boston herself broke it down with complete clarity. When you go back and watch those replays, Amihier's feet are still moving when the whistle blows. Her body is going backward before Boston's weight even transfers into the contact. A defender must be in legal guarding position, stationary with both feet set, before a charge can be called. In at least 3 of these situations, that standard simply wasn't met. The defender wasn't set. She wasn't in legal guarding position. She was already falling backward before real contact occurred. That's not a charge. That's an actress waiting for her cue. 3 different referees bought the same performance on the same night against the same player. And the consequences were devastating for Indiana's offensive structure. When your best post player can't move freely because one more bad call ends her night, your entire offense shifts around that problem. Clark was getting swarmed on the perimeter with no interior presence pulling defenders away from her. Golden State absolutely knew it. You could see it in how aggressively they packed the paint every time Clark caught the ball on the wing. The driving lanes that should have been available disappeared because Boston wasn't on the floor to command defensive attention in the paint. Despite all of it, Boston still grabbed 6 rebounds and scored 13 points in whatever minutes she actually got to play. Think about what a complete game from her looks like when opponents aren't flopping her onto the bench. She dominated the glass and finished in the paint every time she was actually out there. Stephanie White was forced to manage rotations she never designed and never wanted to run, working around a foul situation that the actual basketball didn't create. Here is the situation. 4th quarter, game on the line. The Indiana Fever trailing by 1, 16 seconds remaining. And Veronica Burton threw an elbow directly into Caitlyn Clark's face. Not a hand in the face while fighting for a loose ball. Not incidental contact on a drive through traffic. An elbow to the face on an inbounds play where Clark wasn't even in an aggressive defensive position. The referees reviewed it. They actually looked at it. And they called nothing. The WNBA's flagrant foul rule is not complicated. It covers unnecessary contact to the head or face of a player. That's the actual language in the rulebook. What Burton did on that inbounds play fits that language directly and without any creative interpretation required. A flagrant call there doesn't just award Indiana free throws. With the score at 88-89 and 16 seconds on the clock, it potentially sends the game to overtime. That's the call the officials swallowed whole while everyone watching, including everyone on both benches, could see exactly what happened. And here's what makes the whole thing even more indefensible. Earlier in the same game, Clark herself received a flagrant foul call for setting a screen. So the standard wasn't being applied with any consistency whatsoever. The referees found a flagrant when Clark set a screen and couldn't locate one when Burton's elbow connected with Clark's face in the 4th quarter with a game on the line. That's not inconsistency. That's a pattern with a direction. Golden State coach Natalie Nikasi challenged the no call, which means everyone in that building understood the play required a second look. The officials gave it that second look and still saw nothing worth calling. Indiana lost a possession they desperately needed. The game ended with them on the wrong side of a result they were close enough to change. The Burton elbow was the most visible moment in a night that was full of similar moments that never produced whistles. Burton had been in Clark's body for 40 minutes because that was the entire Valkyries' defensive philosophy. Every catch, every drive, every inbounds touch. Burton stayed physical and the officials stayed quiet. Clark shot 8 free throws and knocked down all 8 of them, shooting a perfect 8 for 8 from the line. So it's not as though she never got to the stripe. But the contact she absorbed throughout that game went substantially beyond what those 8 calls covered. The scratches she left Indianapolis with 6 days earlier told you everything about the standard of physicality she plays through on any given night. Burton finished with 25 points and a career-high 5 blocks. Gabby Williams added 19. Golden State produced 11 blocks as a team. The Valkyries were genuinely excellent on the defensive end. Their length caused real problems. Their athleticism disrupted Indiana's rhythm in legitimate ways. But there's a meaningful difference between winning because you're good and winning because the officials allow you to be physical without consequence. On May 28th in San Francisco, the Valkyries got to be both simultaneously. In the middle of all the chaos, all the blown calls, all the foul trouble that shouldn't have existed, one player delivered a performance that the Valkyries never saw coming and couldn't find an answer for. Raven Johnson scored a career-high 16 points on 7 for 10 shooting. In a game that was physically brutal, emotionally draining, and played against one of the best defenses in the league on the road in a hostile building, that is a genuinely outstanding performance by any measure. Johnson changed Indiana's tempo every single time she checked in, bringing pace and aggression that Golden State had spent no preparation time accounting for. Stephanie White trusted Johnson enough to keep her on the floor during defensive possessions late in the game. That's not something you do with a bench player you're simply riding because she's hot. That's coaching trust built through actual sustained performance, and Johnson earned every second of it in the most difficult possible environment. If White isn't finding Johnson more consistent rotation minutes going forward, that's a conversation worth having openly. The talent was there when Indiana needed it most. While all of this was happening around her, Caitlyn Clark was making history. She found Sophie Cunningham with a precise cross-court pass that became her 500th career assist. Clark is now the fastest player in WNBA history to reach 500 career assists. She already owned the same record for reaching 1,000 career points. She produced these historic numbers with Veronica Burton pressing her body all night, with no flagrant foul protection, in a road game with a hostile crowd, managing back soreness, while constantly fighting for every catch and every inch of space she occupied on the floor. Clark finished with 16 points, 6 assists, and 3 steals. Kelsey Mitchell added 14 points. And Indiana's 90% free throw shooting as a team kept them within striking distance during stretches when field goals weren't falling cleanly. That discipline at the line was crucial because it kept the deficit close enough that every officiating decision in the fourth quarter carried actual weight. If Indiana gets blown out, the Burton elbow no call is just another bad moment in a forgettable road loss. They weren't blown out. They were right there. And that's exactly why every wrong call actually changed the outcome. Cunningham scored 11 points and knocked down the pass that put Clark in the record books. Lexi Hull and Michaela Timpson both produced defensive plays that prevented Golden State from pulling away in earlier quarters, contributions that don't show up in a box score in any way that reflects their actual value. Indiana staying close enough for the fourth quarter to matter didn't happen by accident. It happened because multiple players stepped up and competed through conditions designed to grind them down. Some of the criticism directed at Stephanie White's late-game decision-making, specifically the defensive switching scheme and some execution issues down the stretch, is legitimate. White herself would probably acknowledge there are adjustments she'd make with a second chance. But a significant portion of those late-game problems trace directly back to Boston sitting in foul trouble she never should have been in. When your interior anchor can't play freely, your defensive structure shifts, and no amount of coaching adjustments fully covers that hole. You can't scheme around a missing player the way you can scheme around a struggling one. And here's the issue that extends far beyond one game in San Francisco. Clark gets bodied more than almost any guard in the WNBA and draws fewer foul calls than the contact she absorbs actually warrants. Boston's interior game keeps getting derailed by charge calls that collapse under replay scrutiny. These aren't observations from one bad night in a hostile building. They're a pattern visible across multiple games and multiple opponents. If the WNBA's officiating crews won't protect these players the way the rulebook explicitly says they should, then the league is functionally telling every opposing coaching staff that physical intimidation against Indiana is a free strategy. Wear down Clark. Flop on Boston, take the contact, sell the reaction, and watch the officials do the rest. There's no real cost for it, there's no deterrent, there's just a blueprint that works. The Valkyries are a genuinely talented team with legitimate defensive capability. Their length is real. Their athleticism is real. Natalie Nikasi's preparation is real. None of that required officials to let Burton elbow Clark in the face and pretend they didn't see it. None of that required 3 separate charge calls on Amihier that fell apart immediately under replay review. Golden State could have won that game on its actual merits. Instead, the officiating gave them a cushion they didn't need to earn. Indiana Fever are still building something real in Indianapolis. Clark is rewriting records at a pace no player in WNBA history has ever matched. Boston is a double-double threat even when she's stuck in foul trouble she never earned and never deserved. Johnson just proved she can go for a career high in a road game against a top defense when the moment demands it. Cunningham, Mitchell, Hull, and Thompson are all contributing to something that has genuine championship ceiling potential. The talent on this roster is absolutely good enough to compete for a title. The pieces are there. The coaching is there. The competitive fire, as Clark herself put it, is absolutely there. But none of that gets Indiana where they're going if opponents keep receiving a free pass to foul Clark without a whistle, to elbow her in the face at the most critical moment of a game without consequence, and to flop their way into benching Boston every single time Indiana needs her most in a close game. Aaliyah Boston sat at that press conference table and told you exactly what happened. Not with anger, not with blame shifting. With precision and honesty from someone who had just watched the game's officiating function as a weapon against her own team for 40 minutes. She watched phantom charges pile up against her. She watched the Burton elbow call get reviewed and buried. And she sat down and described all of it clearly because what happened on that floor on May 28th was genuinely indefensible, and she knew it, and she was done pretending otherwise. The Fever were good enough to win that game. The officiating made sure they didn't. That's the story. That's what the numbers show, what the replays confirm, and what Aaliyah Boston's face told you before she ever opened her mouth. Do you think the referees cost the Fever the game? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and turn on all notifications so you never miss a breakdown. We'll see you in the next one.